10 minutes before the wedding march was set to play, the door to the bridal suite swung open. I lifted my eyes and saw Caleb Thorne standing in the doorway, with Layla Hart trailing behind him. She wore a white cocktail dress that accentuated her slender waist and long legs. Her makeup flawless, a pearl hair clip tucked behind one ear as if she was desperate for everyone to know that she wanted to be the star of this wedding too. I sat in front of the mirror, my wedding dress train spreading across the floor. The makeup artist and her assistant had just been sent out by Caleb, leaving the three of us alone in the suite. The air hung heavy with an uncomfortable silence. Caleb spoke first, his voice low, as if he was asking me to do the most trivial thing in the world. Eleanor, before we walk down the aisle, I need you to apologize to Layla. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, brushing a stray strand of hair behind my ear, my tone completely flat. Apologize for what? Layla bit her lip, putting on that innocent expression I'd grown sick of seeing over the past 3 years. Eleanor, don't misunderstand. Caleb doesn't mean it like that. He just thinks that since all the media, investors, and partners are here today, this is the perfect opportunity to clear things up about the Horizon collection. I finally turned to look at her. Clear up what exactly? Her eyes reddened slightly, and she spoke in that soft, gentle voice that made my skin crawl. The core inspiration for the Horizon collection actually came from sketches I drew when I was studying abroad. You did a lot of the detailed development and execution later, and I've always been grateful for that. So if you just say on stage that you were mainly responsible for RD and implementation, and I was responsible for the core concept, that would be enough. Then when I officially join Luminara Beauty, no one will talk behind my back. I stared at her and laughed. So you want me to stand on my wedding stage and admit I was just a glorified assistant, while you step into the spotlight as the real genius? Is that what you're saying? Layla's face stiffened. Caleb frowned, his tone clearly impatient now. Eleanor Voss, don't put it so harshly. Layla had a hard time alone abroad all these years. Now that she's back to develop her career, giving her a co-creative director position at Luminara will be good for the company. Good for the company. I looked at him. Or good for you. Caleb pressed his lips together, clearly tired of beating around the bush. Eleanor, let me be straight with you. After the wedding, Luminara is gearing up for its next round of funding. Investors care a lot about the founding team's story, and they're much more impressed with Layla's international background and public image. You handle the RD. Layla handles the face of the brand. It's the perfect arrangement. I let out a soft "oh." And what about me? You'll still be Mrs. Thorne. Of course. Caleb looked at me as if he was bestowing some great honor upon me. After we're married, you won't have to work so hard anymore. I'll keep your position in the RD department open, and we can talk about shares later. You can just stay home and relax. Maybe attend the occasional brand event. That's more than enough. Even Layla couldn't hide a hint of smug satisfaction at these words. She took a step forward, her voice so sweet it was almost cloying. Eleanor, at the end of the day, women need to step back from their careers to focus on family. You've worked so hard these past 3 years. Caleb is just looking out for you. I stared at her perfectly made-up face and suddenly felt like laughing. Looking out for me. He built this company on the vintage family formulas. My mother left me. I spent 3 years burning the midnight oil in the lab, chased down supply chains for 3 years, and built Luminara Beauty from the ground up. Now that the company was finally worth something, the market was booming, and funding was just around the corner. They suddenly showed up to tell Mumin belong at home. They certainly picked the perfect time. I slowly stood up. Layers of my wedding dress cascaded down around me. The woman in the mirror had perfect makeup, but her expression was completely blank, her eyes growing colder by the second. Caleb Thorne. I looked at him. So tell me, who exactly is this wedding for? Me, or her? His frown deepened, and he was clearly losing his patience. Eleanor, don't make a scene. The wedding live stream has already started, and all the guests are here. I don't want to fight with you right now. You've always been so reasonable and compliant. It make this difficult for me. Reasonable and compliant. I'd heard those 2 words for 3 whole years. Luminara Beauty started as nothing more than a failing small factory left to me by my mother, along with a few yellowed handwritten formula journals. My mother died young, and all she left me was a small stake in the company, an old warehouse, and one piece of advice: Eleanor, never give what you've worked so hard for to someone who doesn't deserve it. Unfortunately, I was young and stupid back then. When Caleb started pursuing me, Luminara was at its lowest point. I was short on money, short on channels, short on a team, and most of all, short on someone who could stand in front of the cameras and tell the brand story. Caleb appeared at just the right moment, charming, polished, with a way with words. He'd bring me late-night snacks when I was up revising formulas, take the blame for me when suppliers stood us up, and hold me when I cried over piles of failed samples, saying, Eleanor, Luminara will be ours someday. I believed him, so I stepped back from the spotlight, gave him the title of founder, and turned myself into the most disposable cog in the company machine. The world knew Caleb Thorne as a young startup darling, and Luminara Beauty as the domestic beauty miracle he built for love. Only I knew which old notebook the best-selling formulas came from, how I fought to save the first production line, and who stayed up night after night creating the Horizon, Wildwood, and Ethereal collections. And now, 10 minutes before my wedding, the man who'd sworn he loved me for 3 years showed up with the one that got away to tell me it was time for me to step aside. How amusing. I looked at Caleb and suddenly smiled. Fine. He clearly hadn't expected that. Layla also froze, probably shocked that I'd agreed so quickly. You agree? Caleb stared at me. I agree. I nodded, even smoothing out the cuffs of my wedding dress. Everyone's here. The cameras are rolling. It really is the perfect time to clear things up. Caleb finally let out a breath of relief, his stiff expression softening back into his usual charming self. He even reached out to touch my shoulder. Eleanor, I knew you'd be gracious about this. After today, I'll make it up to you. I turned my head away from his hand, my smile never fading. Caleb Thorne, did you really think I was here today to marry you? His hand froze midair. I didn't look at him again. I turned, picked up my bouquet from the table, and walked straight out the door in my high heels. Behind me, I heard Caleb's low, urgent voice. Eleanor Voss. What do you mean? I didn't look back. Nothing much. I just suddenly realized that this wedding is the perfect time to close the trap. I pulled open the door to the bridal suite, and the bright lights and noise of the wedding reception flooded in. The venue was decorated in the height of luxury. Crystal chandeliers, a champagne tower, a white rose arch, and a giant projection screen. Even the floral arrangements along the stage were in the silver and white tones I loved. The media section was packed with cameras. The live stream team was making final adjustments to their equipment, and the guest seats were filled with the Thorne family's relatives, investors, partners, and industry journalists. Even my biological father, Harold Voss, who'd never bothered with me before, was sitting front and center in a crisp suit, looking like he'd finally found the perfect opportunity to sell me for a good price. Margaret Thorne, Caleb's mother, spotted me immediately and broke into a warm, maternal smile. She took my hand and led me toward the stage. Eleanor, it's almost time. You look absolutely beautiful today. Once you marry into the Thorne family, we'll be one big family. You can't keep pouring all your energy into the company like you used to. A woman's most important job is to be a devoted wife and mother. I looked at her well-preserved face and felt nothing but amusement. A devoted wife and mother. 3 months ago, when Luminara landed its first 7-figure distribution deal, she'd invited me to the Thorne family estate, personally served me a bowl of soup, and told me how hard I'd worked, that the Thornes would never mistreat me. A month ago, when Luminara's valuation tripled, she told me that girls shouldn't be too assertive, and that after marriage, I should gradually hand over RD control to Caleb, who understood capital operations better. Now that Layla was back, she didn't even bother pretending anymore. In their eyes, I was never the Thornes' future daughter-in-law. I was just Luminara Beauty's most valuable production line. I smiled and gently pulled my hand away. You're absolutely right, Mrs. Thorne. She clearly didn't pick up on the coldness in my tone. And her smile widened. That's my girl. At the end of the day, women need to step back from their careers to focus on family. Actually, there's one thing you're wrong about, I interrupted her. After today, I definitely won't be pouring any more energy into the Thorne family. Her smile froze. Just then, the host stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, welcome to the wedding of Mr. Caleb Thorne and Ms. Eleanor Voss. Applause erupted. And the music swelled. I stood in the wings, watching the wedding photos scroll across the big screen, and suddenly thought how absurd it all was. 3 years ago, Caleb had shown up at my lab with a bouquet of white lilies, saying he didn't mind building something from nothing with me. 3 years later, he showed up at my wedding with the one that got away, ready to step on me to take the company, the brand, and the last thing my mother had left me. Fortunately, I wasn't planning on giving any of it to him anymore. The wedding march began, and I lifted my skirt and walked slowly up the aisle. Cameras followed me. The audience applauded, and the live chat comments flew by. The bride is stunning. Mr. Thorne and Ms. Voss finally made it. Luminara couple forever. This billionaire startup romance is everything. I watched those comments scroll by and felt the corner of my mouth twitch slightly. They wouldn't be shipping us for much longer. The host delivered a passionate speech, his lines as romantic as if they'd been pulled from an assembly line. Caleb stood opposite me, handsome and gentle in his tailored suit, his eyes looking at me with the same practiced warmth. If it weren't for the confrontation in the bridal suite 10 minutes ago, anyone would have thought he was deeply in love. And now, let's hear the groom's most sincere vows to his bride. The microphone was handed to Caleb. He took it, looked at me, his eyes soft, his voice deep and resonant. Eleanor, these past 3 years, thank you for walking this journey with me. You're the most important person in my life, and Luminara Beauty wouldn't exist without you. Today, I'm so happy to stand here in front of all these people and make a lifelong promise to you. Applause erupted again. He delivered it perfectly, every pause, every inflection, every glance. It was like he'd practiced it 100 times. Unfortunately, I knew exactly what he was going to do next. Sure enough, the next second, he smiled and looked out at the audience. But before we exchange rings, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce someone who's just as important to Luminara Beauty. A murmur went through the crowd. Margaret Thorne was the first to start clapping, clearly already in on the plan. Layla lifted her skirt and walked slowly onto the stage from the side entrance. She wore a white dress, her long hair in soft waves, her makeup fresh and natural, her smile perfectly calibrated. If I hadn't been standing here, anyone would have thought there were 2 brides at this wedding. The audience began whispering among themselves. The live chat went completely crazy. What is happening? Wait, he brought another woman on stage at his own wedding. Isn't that Layla Hart, the new brand consultant at Luminara? What is Mr. Thorne doing? The host clearly looked stunned, but he must have gotten a message in his earpiece, because he quickly forced a smile and tried to smooth things over. It looks like Mr. Thorne has a special surprise for everyone today. That's right. Caleb smiled and took over. Layla is going to be a very important partner for Luminara going forward. What many people don't know is that the original inspiration for our best-selling Horizon collection came from a sketch Layla drew years ago. Eleanor has worked incredibly hard on the RD side, and we're all grateful for that. But today, I wanted to take this opportunity to give credit where credit is due. He turned to look at me, his eyes carrying an unmistakable warning. Eleanor, you've been wanting to clear this up too, haven't you? The entire room fell silent. Every camera, every eye, was now focused on me. Harold Voss, sitting in the front row, even looked pleased, clearly convinced that I would once again swallow my pride for the sake of the greater good. Layla took the microphone, her eyes red-rimmed, her voice so soft it sounded like it would blow away in the wind. Eleanor, You've worked so hard these past few years, and I've always been grateful. But Luminara carries the hopes and dreams of so many people. And I don't want to hide in the shadows anymore. Caleb has given me this opportunity today, and I hope we can work together to make Luminara even better. She paused, then gave me a slight bow. So please, give me a chance to stand here fairly. Some people in the audience started clapping. Margaret Thorne smiled and chimed in. Eleanor is such a reasonable and gracious girl. She's never cared about these empty titles. The Thornes will certainly take good care of her. After the wedding, Layla will officially join Luminara, and we'll all be one big family. Exactly. Harold Voss also grabbed a nearby microphone, his tone paternal and condescending. Eleanor has always been independent and hardworking. But she's too stubborn sometimes. Girls shouldn't put their careers above everything else. Once you're married, your family should come first. With a man like Caleb running the company, Eleanor can finally relax. With those two statements, the live chat was flooded with question marks and exclamation points. Wait, what is her father saying? I'm so confused right now. Is this a wedding or a company press conference? Eleanor looks like she's about to kill someone. Yeah. My expression had changed. I was barely holding back a laugh. These people were all in such a hurry. Hurry to pin me down on that stage today, with all the cameras, media, and investors watching. Well, they shouldn't have expected me to go down without a fight. The host was still awkwardly trying to smooth things over when I raised my hand and gestured for him to give me the microphone. He hesitated, then glanced instinctively at Caleb. Caleb gave him a nod, clearly convinced that I had no choice but to play along at this point. The microphone was handed to me. The entire room went quiet. I looked out at all the faces waiting to see me be gracious and suddenly smiled. Since everyone's here, I have a wedding favor for all of you. Caleb's face changed instantly. Eleanor, don't. Relax. I cut him off, my voice low but clear enough to carry across the entire room. You won't be leaving empty-handed. I turned to the control booth. Switch the video. The technician looked confused, clearly not having received this instruction in the schedule. Caleb's face darkened immediately. Don't switch it. Keep playing the wedding video. What's wrong? I looked at him. Are you scared? The murmuring in the audience grew louder. The number of viewers on the live stream skyrocketed. After a few seconds of hesitation, the screen flickered. The wedding photos disappeared, replaced by security camera footage from an office. The footage was crystal clear. In Luminara Beauty's CEO office, Caleb Thorne was pressing Layla hard against the desk, kissing her. The camera had no sound, but the angle was perfect, and their faces were unmistakable. The entire room went dead silent. Caleb's face turned white as a sheet. Layla's legs gave out, and she almost collapsed. The footage on the big screen continued. The second clip had audio. It was still Caleb's office. Still the two of them. Layla was leaning against his chest, laughing softly. Once the wedding is over, Eleanor's formula licenses, founders' shares, and RD authority will all be ours. She's such a sentimental fool. Marriage is the perfect trap for her. Caleb chuckled lowly. Don't worry. She treats Luminara like it's her life. I'm going to use this wedding to make her hand it all over herself. Once she signs the post-marital asset merger agreement, Luminara will belong to the Thornes, not the Vossas. The screen froze. The audience erupted. Margaret Thorne screamed, "Turn it off. Turn it off now." Harold Voss jumped to his feet, his face purple with rage. Eleanor Voss, have you lost your mind? I stood on the stage, holding the microphone, watching the chaos unfold below me, and felt surprisingly calm. Lost my mind. I laughed. We're just getting started. The big screen lit up again for the third time. This time, it showed financial statements and several signed documents. The projection clearly highlighted several large money transfers from Luminara Beauty over the past year. A luxury riverfront penthouse, 2 high-end cars, and 3 overseas luxury accounts, all laundered through brand marketing and channel promotion expenses, with Layla Hart as the final beneficiary. At the same time, A voiceover began playing. It was hidden camera footage of Caleb having dinner with Harold Voss. Harold's voice was low. Wait until after the wedding to transfer the original shares Eleanor's mother left her. She's completely devoted to you, just sweet-talk her a little. Women always put their husbands first once they're married. Caleb smiled and nodded. Don't worry, Uncle Harold. She trusts me completely. She'll never suspect a thing. The room went deathly quiet. Then, like a powder keg being lit, the entire wedding venue exploded into chaos. Holy shit. This is disgusting. Is he trying to steal her company through marriage? Caleb was embezzling company money to keep his mistress. Even her own father was in on it. The live chat was moving so fast it was impossible to read. Someone pinch me. This can't be real. The entire family is leeching off her. Eleanor has been through so much. I always knew those Luminara bestsellers didn't sound like something Caleb Thorne could come up with. Caleb finally snapped out of his shock and lunged for the microphone in my hand. Eleanor, stop this right now. I stepped back, pulled off my engagement ring, and dropped it into the nearby champagne tower right in front of everyone. The sound of shattering glass and splashing champagne echoed through the room. Another moment of stunned silence. I looked at Caleb and said his full name for the first time. Talk about this later. I smiled coldly. You used my technology to make yourself look like a genius. You used my company to keep your mistress. You used my wedding to give her a platform. You tried to steal the shares my mother left me to line your family's pockets. And now you want to talk about this later. Caleb's face was twisted with rage as he grabbed for my wrist, his voice low and dangerous. Eleanor Voss, do you have any idea who's here today? You're ruining this wedding. What good does that do you? What good does it do me? I stared at him. Plenty. I pulled my wrist free and turned to face all the cameras. Like letting everyone know exactly who's been working their ass off to build Luminara Beauty these past 3 years. And who's been nothing but a blood-sucking parasite. Layla finally broke down. Tears streaming down her face. Looking absolutely devastated. Eleanor, how can you slander me like this? Caleb was just helping me out because I was struggling when I first got back. Are you really going to ruin my life over this? Helping you out a few times. I looked at her. Using Luminara's money to buy you a 2.3 million car is helping you out a few times. Having the entire PR team build you a genius international designer persona is helping you out a few times. Planning to steal my formulas and shares after the wedding is helping you out a few times. Her tears froze mid-face. Margaret Thorne could no longer maintain her composure. She pointed a finger at me. Her voice shrill. Eleanor Voss. Don't forget you're about to be a thorn. You're making a complete fool of yourself and our family. A thorn. I laughed. No thanks. I'd rather not catch whatever disease your family has. Someone in the audience snickered. Margaret's face turned purple with rage. Harold Voss stormed onto the stage. His hand raised to slap me. You ungrateful brat. Shut your mouth. I stood my ground, not moving an inch. The next second, a hand with long, elegant fingers reached out from the side and caught his wrist firmly. The grip wasn't particularly strong, but it stopped him cold. Every eye in the room turned toward the new arrival. Lucian Cross stood at the edge of the stage, dressed in a black suit, his features sharp and cold, his expression as indifferent as if he were watching a farce. He was the representative from our largest potential investor and the last person Caleb wanted to see in this situation. Harold froze. Mr. Cross. Lucian released his wrist and pulled out a handkerchief, wiping his fingers slowly and deliberately, his voice completely emotionless. Mr. Voss. Hitting a woman in public is rather unbecoming. Harold's face turned red and white with embarrassment. Caleb looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He clearly hadn't expected Lucian to intervene. I glanced at Lucian. He didn't look at me. Just cast a brief glance at the broken glass and chaos around me, as if making an offhand comment. Ms. Voss, if you're going to blow up the table, you might as well blow it up completely. I smiled. He always did know exactly what to say. You're right. I picked up the microphone again and turned to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, that was just the appetizer. Now, let's get to the main event. Caleb's face turned ashen. Eleanor, what's the rush? I looked at him. You love telling stories in front of the cameras, don't you? Today, I'm going to let you tell the whole story. I gestured to my assistant. The next second, several lawyers in tailored suits walked in through the entrance, their steps crisp and professional, and took up positions on either side of the stage. The audience erupted again. I took a stack of documents from one of the lawyers and held them up to the cameras. These are the original copies of Luminara Beauty's 3 core patents, as well as the intellectual property registration certificates for all our formulas. The patent applicant, formula owner, and signatory of every single original RD log, all of them are me, Eleanor Voss. Caleb's face drained of all color. Margaret gasped. That's impossible. Luminara belongs to Caleb Thorne. I finished for her, my smile turning cold. Mrs. Thorne, did you forget that Luminara started as nothing more than an old factory owned by my mother? When Caleb joined the company, he couldn't even tell you the correct wax ratio for a lipstick. Now you've been eating off my RD for so long, you actually think you own the place. It was like a bomb had gone off in the room. The live stream completely crashed from the traffic. Holy shit. Luminara is actually Eleanor's company, so Caleb has been stealing her work this entire time. This isn't just being a shitty boyfriend, this is commercial fraud. I opened the second document. Additionally, this is the supplementary clause to the equity holding agreement that Caleb signed with me. To put it simply, the so-called founder's shares that Caleb holds are just a proxy. The real majority shareholder of Luminara Beauty has always been me. This time, even the investors in the audience couldn't sit still. Some stood up immediately. Others pulled out their phones and started typing furiously. And more than one looked at Caleb like he was already dead. Caleb finally panicked completely. Eleanor, you're insane. If you make this public, it will destroy Luminara. Our stock price, our funding, our channel confidence, everything will be ruined. Oh, I looked at him. So you do know what fear feels like. I handed the documents to the lawyer beside me, my voice clear and steady for everyone to hear. Effective immediately. Caleb Thorne is relieved of all operational, financial, and branding authority at Luminara Beauty. Layla Hart, who has used Luminara's brand concepts and RD work without authorization, will be subject to full legal action. As for the Thorne and Voss family's involvement in money laundering, fraudulent equity holding, and marriage fraud. I paused, smiling toward the entrance. The police should be here any minute now. Almost as soon as the words left my mouth, the venue doors swung open. 2 police officers and several financial crimes detectives walked in, heading straight for Caleb. Margaret screamed, "What are you doing? This is my son's wedding." The lead officer held up his badge, his tone professional and neutral. "Mr. Caleb Thorne, we have received reports alleging embezzlement of company funds, forgery of authorization documents, and fraudulent financing. Please come with us to assist with the investigation." The last trace of color left Caleb's face. He turned to me sharply, his voice hoarse. "Eleanor, you planned this all along, didn't you?" I stood among the broken glass and spilled champagne, my wedding dress train dragging through the mess, and felt the corner of my mouth lift into a smile. "That's right. You thought I was here today to get married. Actually, I was here to take down your entire family empire." The wedding venue descended into complete chaos. Margaret threw herself at the officers trying to stop them. Layla cried and backed away, tripping over her high heels and falling to the floor. Harold Voss looked like he'd seen a ghost. My stepmother and useless stepbrother rushed from the guest seats, screaming and trying to get onto the stage, only to be stopped by security and the lawyers. The media surged forward, their cameras flashing so brightly it was almost blinding. The live stream hit over 1 million viewers, the comments scrolling so fast they were impossible to read. "This is the biggest scandal of the year. The one that got away crashes the wedding, and the Thornes end up bankrupt. Eleanor Voss just went absolutely nuclear." She didn't come here to get married, she came here to raid their entire operation. I looked down at the faint ring mark on my finger and suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of relief. 3 years. I'd had enough of pretending. Enough of holding back. I lifted my head and looked out at everyone in the room. My voice small but unshakable. The wedding is cancelled. Additionally, effective immediately, I am taking full control of Luminara Beauty, Caleb Thorne, Layla Hart, the Thorne family, the Voss family. I paused and smiled. Your good days are over. At the back of the stage, standing apart from the chaos and flashing cameras, Lucian Cross looked at me, and the corner of his mouth lifted in the faintest of smiles. And I knew this was just the beginning. Less than 20 minutes after the wedding video went online, the internet exploded. I sat in the car heading to Luminara headquarters, my phone lighting up constantly. The one that got away crashed the wedding. Who really founded Luminara Beauty? Caleb Thorne taken by police at wedding. Eleanor Voss takes down their entire empire. Every single one of these hashtags had a bright red trending tag next to it. My assistant Mia sat in the passenger seat, holding 2 laptops and a stack of files, her hands still shaking with excitement. Ms. Voss. The wedding clips are going viral everywhere. The part where you threw the ring into the champagne tower has been viewed over 10 million times in half an hour. I looked down at my phone and said nothing. The trending topics and public outrage were just the first wave. Caleb wouldn't give up that easily, and the Thornes certainly wouldn't sit back and let themselves be publicly humiliated. People like them were never good at apologizing, they were good at controlling the narrative. Sure enough, halfway to the office, Caleb's long statement was posted. The title was polished and professional. Statement on today's unexpected wedding incident. Over 1,800 words. It didn't mention whether the hidden camera footage was real even once. Instead, it repeated 3 things ad nauseum. First, that I had been suffering from long-term emotional instability due to pre-wedding anxiety. Second, that the footage and financial documents had been illegally obtained and maliciously edited. And third, that Caleb had been running Luminara Beauty for years, and I had developed an unhealthy obsession with equity and credit due to the stress of RD work. Finally, he struck a victim pose. I understand Eleanor's sensitivity and anxiety, and I appreciate all her hard work for Luminara over the years. But a brand is not one person's property, and marriage should not be used as a tool to seize control. I hope the public will give her time, and give both of us the dignity we deserve. Almost immediately, the Thorne family's PR accounts, paid influencers, and friendly media outlets all reposted the statement. Hidden camera footage at a wedding is a violation of privacy. We support Mr. Thorne in taking legal action. Female entrepreneurs shouldn't let their emotions dictate business decisions. I heard Eleanor has always had control issues. This was probably just a complete breakdown. I read through the coordinated comments and felt my smile turn cold. They really were experts at this. No sooner had the statement been posted than Layla went live on Instagram. She wore a simple White House dress, her eyes red and puffy, her hair messy, looking like she'd been crying for hours. She deliberately chose a dimly lit living room as her background. The second she opened her mouth, she choked up, saying she'd only planned to return to Luminara for professional reasons. That the footage was just them discussing work. That the hug and kiss had been a comforting gesture during a misunderstanding. She added tearfully, I never wanted to destroy anyone's relationship. I just never thought that a woman's jealousy could really ruin another person. The comments immediately filled with "We love you, Layla, even the other woman has feelings, Eleanor is terrifying." I leaned back in the car seat, listened to her entire pathetic performance, and laughed. The Thornes and Layla really did work well together. As soon as the car pulled up to the office building, my phone rang again. It was Harold Voss. I stared at the caller ID for a second, then answered. The second the line connected, he started yelling, Eleanor Voss, do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused? I stepped out of the car in my high heels, my expression calm. I know, quite a lot. You have the nerve to say that. Harold's voice was shaking with rage. The Thorns are furious. You ruined the wedding, thought Caleb, taken in for questioning, and turned Luminara into a laughingstock. What are you trying to do? Do you want to destroy yourself completely? I looked up at the giant Luminara beauty billboard on the side of the building. It still had Caleb's promotional photo from last year, handsome, gentle, like he was born to be in the spotlight. 3 years ago, I'd thought Luminara needed a face like that to succeed. Turns out, bad judgment really does come back to bite you, Dad, I said flatly. Did you forget that you were in one of those videos? There was a sharp silence on the other end of the line. After a moment, his voice lowered, taking on that patronizing paternal tone he thought was so convincing. I was doing what was best for you, Eleanor. What good would all that stuff your mother left do you? A young woman alone. The Thorns have resources and connections, and Caleb loves you. Once you're married, what difference does it make if the shares are in his name or yours? We're family, why count every penny? I laughed. Family. Yes, family. He sounded relieved, like he'd finally found the right angle. You need to post a statement right now saying the wedding was just a misunderstanding and that you released the videos on impulse. Then go apologize to the Thorns and get the trending topics taken down. I'll handle the rest. Caleb still cares about you if you just stop acting crazy. Harold Voss. I cut him off. Who gave you the right to tell me what to do? He froze. From the day you married Clara, to the day you started transferring my mother's dividends into her son's account, to today when you sat in that audience and told everyone that women should put their families first. You stopped being my father a long time ago. There was a loud bang as he slammed his fist on a table. You ungrateful. Don't get too excited. I walked into the elevator, my voice growing calmer. You won't have time to yell at me much longer. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his screaming. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. Luminara headquarters was in complete chaos. The legal, finance, PR teams, and several executives were all crowded outside the conference room, their expressions a mix of guilt, panic, and relief. Caleb had been putting on a good show for the public these past few years, but behind closed doors he'd been getting worse and worse, sabotaging projects, stealing credit, altering budgets, and hiring his friends into key positions. Many people had been unhappy for a long time, but no one had dared to speak up. As soon as I walked in, the PR director rushed over. Ms. Voss, the situation is really bad. Caleb's team has already told all the brand PR accounts to stick to their story about you being emotionally unstable. If we don't respond soon, the narrative will only get worse. I set my phone on the table and pulled out a chair. Respond. The PR director blinked. Right now. Yes, right now. I looked at her. Go live. The conference room went completely quiet. The finance director hesitated. Ms. Voss, isn't going live too risky? People are already saying you have mental health issues. If you confront them directly. If I don't confront them directly, they'll keep lying. I looked at him. So let's make sure they can't lie anymore. I turned to Mia. Bring me everything I asked you to prepare. 10 minutes later, my live stream went live. The title was simple. Since you all want to see it, I'll say everything once and for all. No crying, no filters, no dramatic music. I sat in Luminara's top floor conference room, with floor-to-ceiling windows behind me, and a table covered in notarized documents, medical reports, financial statements, and 2 laptops. Within seconds, the viewer count hit 100,000. The comments flew by like a waterfall. Here we go. The main event. Let's see how she tries to spin this. Wedding girl. Let's hear it. I'm actually rooting for her to clap back. I looked directly into the camera, and my first words silenced the comments completely. Let's start with the facts. First, I am not mentally unstable. Second, the hidden camera footage is 100% real. Third, Caleb Thorne, Layla Hart, and my so-called father, none of them are getting away with this. The live stream exploded. I didn't give anyone a chance to interrupt. I held up the first document to the camera. These are all my medical records and psychological evaluations from the past 3 years. Pre-wedding physical. Notarized copies. Hospital stamps, complete timeline included. If Caleb says I've been emotionally unstable for years, he can show us his evidence. I set the document down and gestured for the lawyer beside me to put the high-resolution scans on the screen. Second, the hidden camera footage was obtained legally. I discovered that someone had tampered with my patent authorization documents and equity supplementary agreements before the wedding. So I had a lawyer present for all evidence collection. The footage relates to marriage fraud and commercial fraud investigations. There was no malicious editing. Third, I opened my laptop. Let's talk about who actually built Luminara Beauty. The screen switched to show 3 years' worth of R&D logs, sample iteration records, supply chain emails, lab access logs, and patent application timelines. Every single one had my name on it. The first version of the Horizon Collection formula, March 7, 2021. I revised it 46 times. The Wildwood Collection packaging concept sketches. November 2021. I drew 23 versions. When the Ethereal Collection had that PR crisis that almost sank the brand, I flew to the factory and stayed there for 48 hours straight to fix the supply chain issue. And what did Caleb Thorne do these past 3 years? I looked at the camera and smiled. He went to award ceremonies, gave business interviews, took promotional photos, and spent Luminara's money on Layla Hart. I clicked my mouse, and the second screen lit up. It showed a complete breakdown of all the suspicious financial transactions, down to the exact date and purpose. See this overseas market research expense, $3.7 million. It was paid to a real estate agency for the luxury riverfront penthouse Layla currently lives in. This high-end client gift maintenance, $1.8 million. That bought Layla's car. And these so-called image consultant fees and brand planning fees, they were all paid to shell companies owned by Layla Hart. The comments were going completely crazy. Holy fucking shit. This isn't embezzlement, this is a foolin' heist. Caleb was using company money to keep his mistress. I'm disgusted. Eleanor isn't crazish giving us a masterclass in evidence. I glanced down at my phone. Caleb's team was already reporting my live stream en masse. The platform's customer service sent me a warning saying I was being accused of leaking confidential business information and inciting harassment. I smiled and projected the warning pop-up onto the big screen. See that? He's panicking. Just then, there was a commotion outside the conference room. The door was thrown open violently. Harold Voss burst in with Clara Voss and my deadbeat stepbrother Jasper Voss. Clara was wearing an expensive designer suit, her eyes red, and she immediately started screaming like she was the victim. Eleanor, haven't you caused enough trouble? You've embarrassed our entire family. Jasper followed behind, filming with his phone, his young face twisted with anger. Sis, is this really necessary? It's just a wedding. You've completely ruined Dad and Caleb's lives. Everyone online is making fun of us. I looked at the three of them and felt nothing but amusement. They really did show up together, like a bad sitcom. The comments exploded even more. Oh my God. The family drama is live. Is that her dad? The stepmom and stepbrother too. This just keeps getting better. Harold marched over to me and reached for the live stream equipment. Turn this off right now. You've disgraced us enough. Touch it and see what happens. I looked up at him. My voice was quiet, but it stopped him cold. I stood up slowly and gestured for Mia to hand me another stack of documents. Since you're all here, we might as well settle all our accounts today. I slammed the documents down on the table. The first page was a copy of my mother's will. Harold's face turned white instantly. Clara also froze. When my mother died, she left me more than just Luminara's original shares. She left me 2 houses, the old factory land, and an irrevocable trust. I flipped through the pages one by one, my voice as calm as if I were telling someone else's story. Unfortunately, I was young and stupid back then, and I believed you when you said we were family. I signed all those power of attorney forms you put in front of me. I looked up at Harold's ashen face. These past years. You've been using my dividends to support Clara and Jasper. You used my mother's rental income to pay for Jasper's car, his study abroad fees, and to bail out his failed business ventures. You even almost mortgaged my mother's old factory to get a loan for the Thorns. Clara finally snapped and lunged for the documents. That's a lie. That money belongs to the family. Belongs to the family. I laughed. The first sports car you bought for your son, the year after you married Harold. That was my mother's dividend money. The apartment you bought in Westside last year, the down payment came directly from my account. Clara. Do you want me to read every single bank transaction out loud for everyone? Her face turned white as a sheet. Jasper flew off the handle like he'd been personally attacked. Eleanor Voss. Are you insane? What do you need all that money for anyway? You're a woman. Mom and I spending a little of it is no big deal. You make so much money. The comments were flying faster than ever. Did he just say that out loud? Classic leech behavior. What do you need all that money for anyway? I want to punch him. I looked at his entitled face and thought about all those years ago, when my mother had just died and he was just a little kid hiding behind Clara. As he grew up, the first thing he learned wasn't gratitude, it was how to ask for things. He thought the monthly allowance I sent was his right. He thought bailing him out of his failed businesses was my responsibility. And when I said no, he called me cold and ungrateful. How amusing. I looked at him and smiled. No big deal. Well, let me tell you something. From today forward, every single penny you've spent is going to be paid back. Jasper froze. I pushed the final document in front of the camera. My voice steady and clear. I, Eleanor Voss, am hereby terminating all financial and personal ties with Harold Voss, Clara Voss, and Jasper Voss. Additionally, I have filed a civil lawsuit and asset freeze petition against them for the long-term embezzlement of my mother's estate, unauthorized transfer of my personal funds, and illegal occupation of my properties. The live stream went completely silent for a second. Then the comments exploded. Holy shit. She just disowned them live on air. This woman is my hero. This isn't a live stream, it's a public execution. Harold finally panicked. He clearly hadn't expected me to tear off the last shred of decency in front of the entire country. Eleanor, don't do anything rash. The anger and authority finally cracked from his face, replaced by desperate pleading. I'm still your father. Your mother has been gone for so many years, her things should be shared by the whole family. You are not my father. I looked at him, and every word was like a knife. From the day you started giving my mother's things to them, you became nothing more than a debtor to me. The entire conference room went quiet. Even the comments seemed to pause for a moment. Harold's face turned from gray to white to a deep, humiliated purple. Clara finally broke down and collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. Harold, look at what your daughter has done. She's trying to ruin us. We've been through so much together. Shut up. I looked at her coldly. Your son is 23 years old. Don't you think it's a little pathetic to still be playing the poor single mother card? Her sobs cut off abruptly, her face twisting with rage. Jasper lunged forward, screaming, "Who are you calling pathetic?" Just then, a quiet voice came from the doorway. Whoever's talking. Probably. Everyone turned at the same time. Lucian Cross stood in the doorway, followed by 2 lawyers and 2 investment bankers in gray suits. He wasn't wearing the black suit from the wedding. He'd changed into a dark gray shirt and a light tie, looking less intimidating but no less elegant. Even so, the entire atmosphere of the room shifted the second he walked in. Jasper automatically stepped back. Harold also froze. MMR. Cross. Lucian ignored them completely. He walked straight over to me and placed a document on the table beside me. I followed up on the legal letters to the platform. The hidden camera footage and your live stream won't be taken down. I gave the trending topics a little nudge. Theory number 1 no. W. He said it as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. But everyone in the room understood exactly what it meant. Lucian Cross was backing me, and he wasn't being subtle about it. The live stream comments went crazy again. Lucian Cross. Is that really Lucian Cross? The guy from Cross Capital, Luminara's biggest potential investor. That line was so cool. I gave the trending topics a little nudge. I looked up at him and smiled. That was fast. Your wedding was quite the spectacle. He looked down at me, and there was a faint smile in his eyes. I figured I should add to the fun. Harold finally found his voice. Mr. Cross, this is a private family matter. It's really not appropriate for you to interfere like this. Lucian turned to look at him. Mr. Voss. Let me correct you. His tone was completely flat. Embezzling an estate is a crime, not a family matter. Embezzling company funds is a crime, not a family matter. And trying to steal a company through marriage. That's not a family matter either. That's just garbage that hasn't been taken out yet. Someone in the conference room snickered. Harold's face turned even more purple. Lucian didn't even bother looking at him again. He turned back to me. You asked me earlier whether we should send the legal letters one by one or take them all down at once. I looked at him and took the document he was holding. My finger tapped lightly on the cover. It was a proposal for an emergency board meeting and supplementary voting documents. My smile deepened. Today seems like a good day to take tea. Hem all down. Half an hour later, Luminara Beauty's emergency board meeting was called to order. By the time the news broke online, the internet was already in a frenzy. Caleb's PR statement had completely backfired, making him look even more guilty in light of all the evidence I'd presented in my live stream. Layla's attempt to play the victim had also blown up in her face. Her line about just wanting to be seen fairly had been turned into a million memes. But what really made the public take my side was the part where I disowned my family. Some people said I was too harsh, but far more people said about time. When the conference room door opened, Caleb was already there. He'd changed his clothes and washed off the wedding makeup, but he looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The financial crimes detectives had only taken him in for an initial interview and hadn't detained him yet, which meant his connections were still working behind the scenes. Layla was also there, wearing a professional suit, her makeup perfectly done, but her eyes were still puffy from crying. She was clearly trying to maintain her elegant, intellectual image, but her face paled when she saw Lucian standing beside me. The directors and executives filed in one by one, the tension in the room so thick you could cut it with a knife. Caleb spoke first, his voice hoarse but still trying to sound authoritative. Eleanor, this has gone far enough. If you stop now, we can still tell the public that the wedding was cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances and that we're restructuring the company internally. Do you really want to destroy Luminara just to get back at me? I opened the file in front of me without even looking up. Caleb Thorne. Do you still not understand what's happening here? He stared at me. I didn't destroy Luminara. I looked up at him. You've been leeching off it for years. Now it's time for you to be removed. He slammed his fist on the table. Eleanor Voss. Don't yell. I closed the file gently. Raising your voice doesn't make you right. Several of the directors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They'd all known for years where Luminara's real value came from. But Caleb had been the face of the company, telling the brand story. And I'd never fought for credit before, so they'd all just looked the other way. Today, they couldn't look away anymore. I pushed the first stack of materials in front of everyone. These are the patents, RD logs, formula evolution records, and notarized documents for Luminara's 3 core collections. The most valuable thing about Luminara Beauty isn't Caleb Thorne's face or his business stories. It's these. I tapped the thick stack of papers, and they all belong exclusively to me. Second, I gestured for the lawyer to turn on the projector. This is the complete evidence chain of Caleb Thorne's unauthorized use of company funds, forgery of concept authorizations, and inflation of marketing expenses over the past 2 years. This includes, but is not limited to, purchasing real estate and vehicles for Layla Hart, fabricating her professional background, and attempting to transfer my shares to himself through the post-marital asset agreement. The room grew quieter and quieter. Caleb's face grew whiter and whiter. Layla finally couldn't take it anymore. She gritted her teeth and said, Eleanor Voss, This is terrible for Luminara's reputation. Do you really think the market only cares about RD? Without Caleb's branding and connections, your little lab would have gone under years ago. I turned to look at her and suddenly smiled. Layla Hart, do you have any idea how ridiculous you sound? She froze. Luminara was willing to spend $3 million on your branding because Caleb thought it was easier to find a pretty girl who spoke English and could take credit for other people's work than to actually learn how to make a good product. My voice was soft, but every word cut like a knife. So you're not the face of the brand. You're just a very expensive display stand. Someone snickered. Layla's face turned bright red, and she stammered, "You." I ignored her completely and turned to the last page of my presentation. Now, let's proceed with the board meeting agenda. First item. Remove Caleb Thorne from all operational and management positions at Luminara Beauty. Second item. Revoke all his branding rights and use of the founder title. Third item. Initiate legal proceedings against him and all related parties. Caleb jumped to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't fire me. Eleanor Voss. Do you really think the board will side with you? I looked up at his face, finally stripped of all its gentle charm, and smiled softly. I wasn't sure before, but now, I'm pretty confident. I turned to Lucian. He leaned back in his chair, his long fingers tapping idly on the table, then pushed a letter of intent across the table to the center of the room. Allow me to introduce myself. He looked up, his voice calm and measured. Lucian Cross. Cross Capital. I'm not here today to watch a drama. Everyone's eyes fixed on the document. Cross Capital has decided to launch a new round of funding and resource acquisitions based on Luminara Beauty's core intellectual property and RD team. On one condition starting today. Luminara Beauty completely severs all ties with Caleb Thorne and any parties associated with him. The last trace of color left Caleb's face. He finally understood. I hadn't just come here to break up with him. I hadn't just come here to get revenge. I'd come to publicly uproot him and CK him out of the company he'd stolen from me. I looked at him and said the final words. Caleb Thorne. From today forward, every single lipstick, every single powder compact, every single serum that Luminara sells, none of the profits will ever go to you again. You loved being the founder so much. Too bad. From now on, you're not even good enough to work for Luminara. 3 days after the emergency board meeting, Caleb Thorne launched his final counterattack. The tide of public opinion had already turned completely against him. After the wedding live stream, I'd gone from the crazy bride who ruined her own wedding to the woman who publicly humiliated her cheating fiancé and his mistress. Longtime Luminara employees had come forward with their own stories, confirming that I was the one who'd spent years in the lab, visiting factories, perfecting formulas, and saving the company from disaster. While Caleb had only ever cared about awards and interviews. But Caleb wasn't completely stupid. He knew that losing the public's favor didn't mean he was finished. If he could launch a successful product and rebuild his founder narrative, he could still make a comeback. So he did the most predictable, most pathetic thing imaginable. He and Layla started their own brand. They called it Lumina Wild. Its packaging style, product concepts, visual identity, and even the name of its debut collection were all strikingly similar to Luminara Beauty's upcoming new season products. The most insulting part was that their PR team put out statements saying this was the continuation of Luminara's true spirit, implying that I'd stolen the company but couldn't steal their creativity. At the same time, they bought dozens of trending topics and influencer posts. Caleb Thorne launches new brand with Layla Hart. The real Luminara left Luminara. Eleanor Voss stole the company with capital. The one that got away is the real creative genius. This strategy actually worked on a small group of people. A new narrative started circulating online. So what if Eleanor won the breakup? Caleb can still build another successful brand from scratch. She only won because she got Lucian Cross on her side. What does a lab rat know about business anyway? Blowing up the wedding was satisfying. But you don't win in business by being emotional. I read these comments and didn't even blink. People who are desperate will always resort to copying and leeching off others. The more desperate they are, the harder they'll try to prove they don't need you. Lucian sat on the couch in my office, his long legs crossed, flipping through Lumina Wild's new marketing materials, a faint smile playing on his lips. Your exfoliant has terrible taste. But he's certainly bold. I was looking through the infringement comparison report from the legal department and hummed in agreement. Desperate people do bold things. So when are you going to take them down? I looked up at him. Not yet. Lucian raised an eyebrow. Wait for what? Wait for them to make all the mistakes they're going to make. I closed the report and pushed it toward him. Right now, they're just guilty of infringement, stealing concepts, and riding on our coattails. But if they rush to launch before us, fight for distribution channels and pre-order sales, they'll have to cut corners on the supply chain. And that means they'll do something stupid. Lucian took the report, his eyes stopping on the last page, and smiled. You think they'll try to steal the core formulas? I don't think, I said flatly. I know they already have. There was a moment of silence in the office. Lucian looked at me, the smile in his eyes growing deeper. Eleanor Voss. Sometimes I think you have everyone's death sentence written out in advance. No. I turned my laptop around to show him. The screen showed security camera footage from a warehouse and several account login records. I just know that people like Caleb Thorne, when they're losing, will never trust their own abilities. They'll always steal, copy, and take what isn't theirs to prove they can survive without you. The more they're afraid of something, the more they'll pretend to be it. Lucian watched the footage for a moment, then gently closed the laptop. So is this launch going to be a product launch? Or a funeral? I smiled. Both. Luminara Beauty's new product launch was scheduled for 7 p.m. on Friday. It was the first time Luminara had faced the market and the media since the wedding fiasco. Everyone was waiting to see if this new founder was actually capable, or just good at blowing up tables, waiting to see if Caleb and Layla would actually pull off a comeback with Lumina Wild, waiting to see if Luminara would recover from the scandal, or if it would collapse completely. The day before the launch, Layla finally couldn't hold back anymore and posted a long video on Instagram. She was back to her innocent victim persona: white blouse, minimal makeup, red-rimmed eyes. She said she hadn't wanted to respond again, but that things had gone too far, and she couldn't just stand by and watch true creativity be swallowed by capital. Lumina Wild isn't here to compete with anyone. It's just a little bit of original intention that Caleb and I want to hold on to. Some things shouldn't be hoarded by one person. I know everyone hates me right now, but I still believe that people who actually make products don't spend all their time seeking revenge. At the end of the video, she showed a hand-drawn sketch. It did look somewhat similar to Luminara's upcoming new collection. The comments immediately filled with doubt. Wait. Is there actually a twist here? That sketch does look pretty old. Did Eleanor actually steal Layla's idea? Mia almost threw her tablet across the room in anger. How dare she? That sketch is one of your discarded drafts from 2 years ago. How can she have the nerve to call it her own? I looked down at the sketch and didn't get angry. I just felt amused. It was a concept extension I'd worked on for the Horizon collection 2 years ago. It was pretty, but it wasn't complete enough to support an entire product line. I'd filed it away in the archives and never touched it again. There was only one way Layla could have gotten it. There was still a mole in Luminara. I handed the tablet back to Mia, my voice calm. Have legal finish putting together the evidence chain. Release the recording of her talking to the contract manufacturer at midnight tonight. Mia blinked. Then her eyes lit up. The one you told me to hold on to. Yeah, I nodded. She wants to play the original creator. Let's let her play it all the way. At 11:58 p.m., Luminara Beauty's official account posted 2 audio recordings and 3 signed documents. In the first recording, Layla was talking to a contract manufacturer manager. Her voice low but crystal clear. The formula ratios don't have to be exactly the same. Just change 1 or 2 small parameters. We just need to launch before Luminara Beauty. I know Eleanor's RD process pretty well, as long as the colors, textures, and concepts are similar enough. Consumers won't be able to tell the difference. The second recording was Caleb's voice. Marrying her to get the shares was always the safest plan. She'd never leave me. Luminara would have been mine eventually, even now that we've fallen out. There's no way she can run the company alone. At the same time, Luminara's legal department released comparative evidence proving that Layla's original sketch had been created after our discarded draft was archived, and that the metadata on her file still contained Luminara's internal document numbering system. The internet exploded again. The fake one that got away has been completely exposed. How does Caleb Thorne manage to make every attempt to clear his name even worse? LMAO. So Lumina Wild actually stands for Stolen Wild. The launch hasn't even happened yet, and they've already buried themselves. The next afternoon, the area outside Luminara headquarters was packed with media, and Caleb and Layla actually showed up. They made a grand entrance. Caleb was wearing a dark blue suit, looking better than he had a few days ago, like he'd managed to put his polished mask back on. Layla was wearing a white suit, her makeup perfect, still trying to maintain that elegant intellectual image even after the audio leak. The second they got out of the car, they were surrounded by reporters. Mr. Thorne, is the audio recording from last night real? Ms. Hart, do you have any response to the allegations that you stole Luminara's internal documents? There are reports that Lumina Wild has already received an infringement lawsuit. Can you confirm this? Caleb smiled for the cameras. Incredibly brazen. There are always misunderstandings and smears in business competition. We're not here today to fight. We're here to see if Luminara Beauty still lives up to its name. What a line. He was positioning himself as the wronged founder who still cared about the brand, and Layla as the misunderstood artist who just wanted to create. If I didn't know exactly what kind of person he was, I might have almost believed him. Mia stood in front of the security monitor, grinding her teeth. How dare he show his face here? I sat in the backstage makeup room, slowly putting on my earrings. Good. If they didn't show up, the show wouldn't be complete. At 7 p.m. sharp, the launch began. The live stream went live simultaneously across all platforms. The media section was completely full, with industry guests, investors, distributors, factory owners, and even most of the people who'd come to gawk at the wedding in attendance. Caleb and Layla had been given front row seats in the most visible part of the room. They weren't here to support us. They were here to sabotage the launch. I knew that, which is exactly why I'd saved them the best seats. The lights dimmed, and the room fell silent. After a brief introduction from the host, Luminara Beauty's new brand video played. There was no Caleb Thorne, no billionaire startup romance, no carefully crafted persona, just an old factory, a worn lab table, pages of yellowed handwritten formulas, and the back of a young woman with her hair in a low ponytail, wearing a white lab coat and standing in front of a lab bench. A single line of text appeared on the screen. Luminara Beauty began with a single old piece of paper covered in lipstick formulas. The room was quiet for a moment. Caleb's face changed, because this wasn't his story. This was the real story of Luminara Beauty. When the video ended, the lights came back up on the center of the stage. I walked out wearing a black suit dress, my hair pulled back in a low bun, my makeup cool and clean. No wedding dress, no tears, no mess, just a sharp, unshakable calm. Applause erupted. I stepped up to the microphone, and my first words silenced the room. Today was supposed to be Luminara Beauty's new product launch. But before we talk about the products, I want to clear one thing up once and for all who Luminara Beauty really belongs to. The cameras in the back immediately lifted. The live chat comments exploded. Here we go. The main event. This woman always sounds like she's about to destroy someone. I raised my hand, and the big screen behind me switched to an old photograph. The woman in the photo was young, with features that looked somewhat like mine. She was standing in front of an old factory, holding a box of unlabeled lip gloss samples, smiling softly but brightly. I looked at the photo, my throat tightening for a split second, but my voice remained steady. Her name was Alara Voss. She was my mother, and the original founder of Luminara Beauty. The room went completely quiet. I continued. Luminara didn't start out as Luminara. It was called Alara's Workshop back then, a small, failing factory that made traditional Asian lip tints and balms. She wanted to modernize the old formulas, to bring back the things no one was making anymore. But she never got to finish what she started before she died. All she left me wasn't a fortune, or a ready-made company, just a stack of handwritten formulas, a piece of old land, a leaky warehouse, and one piece of advice. I paused and looked directly into the camera. She said, "Never give what you've worked so hard for to someone who doesn't deserve it." Not a single person in the room made a sound. My fingers tightened slightly, then relaxed. Unfortunately, I didn't listen to her at first. I believed in Caleb Thorne. I believed in love, in marriage, in building something together. I believed in family. I thought that if I gave enough, I would get something real in return. I learned the hard way that some people don't come into your life to love you. They come to see how much you're worth. Someone in the audience let out a soft gasp. The live chat was filled with "Oh my God." I didn't stop. Caleb Thorne got to where he was not because he was talented, but because I was willing to let him stand in my light. The Voss family got to leech off me for years, not because they deserved it, but because I still thought of them as family. But not anymore. I raised my hand, and the first document appeared on the big screen. My mother's original RD notes, Luminara's earliest formula records, and the complete evolution of every core collection. The core base formula for the Horizon collection came from a single page of my mother's handwritten notes. I spent a year and a half adapting it for mass production. The pigment stabilization technology for the Wildwood collection. My team and I spent 8 months in the lab perfecting it. That lipstick from the Ethereal collection that made Luminara famous. I tested 63 different versions before we launched it. These are what make Luminara Beauty. Not Caleb Thorne's interviews. Not Layla Hart's tears. Not the brand stories you read in magazines. I finished this part and turned to the front row. So today, first things first. Layla Hart, please stand up. Every eye in the room turned to her. Layla clearly hadn't expected me to call her out directly. Her face stiffened, but she forced herself to stand up. I looked at her, my tone almost gentle. You've always said you just wanted to be seen fairly, haven't you? Well, today, we're going to see you very clearly. The big screen flashed, showing the transcript of her call with the contract manufacturer, the timestamp on the original sketch, and the screenshot of her file with Luminara's internal document number. Your so-called original concept came from Luminara Beauty's discarded draft archive. Your so-called return to entrepreneurship was funded by Caleb Thorne embezzling Luminara's money to build your image and your resume. Your so-called misunderstanding was just you getting caught stealing. The sound of camera shutters filled the room. All the color drained from Layla's face. She tried to speak. Eleanor, Don't call me Eleanor. I cut her off. My voice calm but sharp. Your greatest talent isn't design or branding. It's standing on the stage someone else built and pretending the light is shining on you. You wanted to crash my wedding. Fine. You wanted to steal my fiancé. Be my guest. But you should never have tried to steal from me. Her lips trembled, and she couldn't say another word. I didn't look at her again. I turned to the man sitting next to her. Second thing, Caleb Thorne. He didn't move, but his face was already twisted with rage. I looked at him and smiled slightly. You've always wanted to prove that you could build a successful brand without me, haven't you? Well, today I'm going to prove it for you. You can't. The audience erupted. The big screen switched again, showing Lumina Wild supply chain contracts, authorization documents, and pre-order data. Immediately after, the legal director took the stage and read 3 official notices aloud. First, Lumina Wild has been issued a preliminary injunction for infringing on Luminara Beauty's core intellectual property. Second, Luminara Beauty has sent infringement notices to all partner platforms and core distributors. All Lumina Wild pre-order links were taken down 30 minutes ago. Third, Mr. Caleb Thorne is now the subject of a formal criminal investigation for embezzlement of company funds, forgery of authorization documents, fraudulent financing, and conspiracy to transfer marital assets, pursuant to our asset freeze petition. Several bank accounts and assets belonging to Mr. Thorne and related guarantors have been frozen. The room exploded when the last sentence was read. Caleb jumped to his feet, knocking over his chair with a loud crash. Eleanor Voss, you set me up. Set you up. I looked at him, my tone completely flat. You flatter yourself. I'm just giving back everything you did to me. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a hatred that hadn't been there even on the wedding day. You think you've won? You think Luminara will survive this? Do you think the investors will trust you? The distributors will trust you? Eleanor Voss, you only won because you got Lucian Cross. Got me what? A low, cool voice came from the side of the stage. Lucian stood up from the guest seats and walked slowly onto the stage, coming to stand beside me. The cameras flashed like crazy. He took another document from a staff member and opened it. His voice as calm as if he were reading a routine announcement. Cross Capital completed the acquisition of several mature debts from the Thorne Group at 4 p.m. today. Additionally, due to the legal and credit risks arising from Mr. Thorne's personal conduct, several short-term loans that the Thorne Group secured using Luminara's expected funding as collateral are now being called in early. The room went completely silent. Then everyone gasped. Caleb's face turned white, not with anger, but with the cold, hollow terror of someone who's just fallen off a cliff. He finally understood. The Thorne family had been living on borrowed time for years. Caleb had been so desperate to take over Luminara not just because he wanted the brand, but because the Thorne Group needed Luminara's valuation to secure more loans and keep their business afloat. And now, the collateral was gone. The debts had been bought by Lucian Cross. The Thorne family was finished. Margaret Thorne finally snapped and jumped up from her seat, her voice shrill and distorted. Lucian Cross, this is malicious persecution. You have no right to touch the Thorne family's debts. Lucian turned to look at her, his eyes cold and unforgiving. Mrs. Thorne, a debt is a debt. It's only fair that you pay what you owe. Also, he paused, adding dryly, if your son hadn't tried to steal a company through marriage, the Thorne Group wouldn't have collapsed this quickly. It was such a brutal line that the audience was quiet for a second, then erupted into murmurs. I stood beside him and almost laughed. He really was even better at cutting people down than I was. Caleb finally broke, turning sharply to his mother. Mom, you said the loans weren't due until next week. You said Dad had everything under control. He stopped mid-sentence, because he saw me smiling. I looked at him, my voice soft, almost pitying. Did you really never wonder why your father isn't here today? Caleb's pupils dilated in shock. I raised my hand, and the final video appeared on the big screen. It was hidden camera footage of Arthur Thorne meeting with a financial broker late the previous night. His voice was low, but every word was crystal clear. Push Caleb out to take the heat first. The wedding incident has already blown up. Even if we can't save Luminara, we need to drag it out as long as possible. As long as the cash flow holds this week and the overseas money is transferred out, the rest won't be a problem. As for Eleanor Voss, just a woman throwing a tantrum. Once the Thorne Group recovers, we'll deal with her slowly. When the video ended, the audience wasn't just murmuring anymore, they were shouting, "Holy shit! The entire Thorne family is rotten to the core. He's throwing his own son under the bus." So this was never just about stealing a company, it was about marriage fraud and running away with the money. Margaret Thorne went white as a sheet and almost fainted. Caleb stood there completely frozen, like all the bones had been pulled out of his body. I looked at him and felt nothing. A man whose own parents would use him as a scapegoat could never have understood what real love was. It was just a shame it had taken him this long to figure it out. I picked up the microphone again and okayed out at all the cameras. my voice clear and strong for everyone to hear. Today, the final thing. Luminara Beauty's new product line is officially launched. The music swelled. The big screen switched to show models and product shots. The lights came up. And the entire launch event shifted its focus back to the brand. No more drama. No more tears. No more cheating fiancés and mistresses, just products, data, ingredients, test results, and market performance. I stood on the stage, explaining the formula logic, textures, finishes, and RD philosophy one by one. My pace unhurried. My voice steady and confident. The audience gradually shifted from their gossipy mood to genuine attention. They finally realized that I wasn't just good at blowing up tables. I had always been more than capable of standing behind that table. Product swatch videos, third-party test reports, pre-order links, and distribution partnership results were shown one after another. 5 minutes later, real-time data came in from the back-end printers for Luminara's new products surpassed 10 million. In 10 minutes, they hit 30 million. In 20 minutes, they shot straight to number 1 in the platform's beauty category. At the exact same time, Lumina Wild's pre-order pages were completely shut down due to infringement and consumer complaints. And several distributors who had been close to the Thorns started canceling their contracts. Caleb's phone rang constantly. He looked down at it, his hands shaking. I knew exactly what those calls were about. Creditors demanding payment, partners canceling contracts, shareholders screaming. The sound of the Thorn Group finally collapsing. I looked at him and thought that this launch was finally complete. I turned back to the audience for my closing remarks. A lot of people have asked me why I blew up my wedding. Today, I can answer that. Because some tables, if you don't blow them up, you'll never see all the garbage that's hiding underneath. Other people have asked me if I feel good now that I've gotten my revenge. I paused and smiled slightly. Honestly, not really. It feels more like I've just finished planning a funeral. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I lifted my eyes and looked out at Caleb, Layla, Margaret Thorne, and all the people watching the live stream. What died wasn't love or dignity. What died was the naive part of me that thought if I was just good enough, just kind enough, just patient enough, I would get something good in return. But that's okay. The naive part of me is dead. But I'm still alive. When the last word left my mouth, the entire room erupted into applause. Not polite, perfunctory applause, but the kind of spontaneous, thunderous applause that comes from people who have just heard something that resonated deeply with them. The cameras flashed like crazy. The top trending topic on every social media platform changed instantly. Eleanor Vos turns launch into public trial. Eleanor Vos, the real founder of Luminara. Caleb, Thorne and Layla Hart under criminal investigation. Thorne Group cash flow collapse. The one that got away crashed the wedding. She brought their entire family to ruin. Caleb seemed to snap out of his trance and lunged toward the stage, screaming, Eleanor Vos, did you ever even love me? It was such a ridiculous question that I almost didn't understand it at first. Security guards immediately stepped in and restrained him. I stood on the stage, watching him struggle, his face twisted and ugly. A complete contrast to the charming man who'd stood in front of me 3 years ago and told me I was the most important person in his life. I looked at him and answered only one sentence. I did. But you didn't deserve it. He froze completely, as if those words had impaled him. And Layla finally broke completely. She ran toward me, her eyes red and wild, screaming, Eleanor Vos, what do you have to be so proud of? If you hadn't been lucky enough to have a mother who knew how to make formulas, a ready-made factory, and Lucian Cross protecting you, what do you think you'd be? I turned to look at her, and there was actually a hint of pity in my expression. Layla, you still don't get it. My mother left me a starting point, not a finish line. Lucian Cross gave me a stage, not talent. The reason I'm standing here isn't because I was lucky. It's because when all of you tried to step on me, I didn't kneel. She froze. I didn't give her a chance to say anything else. I turned and flipped to the final slide of my presentation. Only one line remained on the screen. Luminara Beauty. From today forward, it belongs only to the Voss family. By the time the launch ended, it was already dark outside. The backstage finally quieted down. The staff was still busy cleaning up. The legal and PR teams were having their final meeting, and Mia ran in, her face red with excitement, to tell me that pre-orders had broken another record. That there were reports of the Thorn Group's bank accounts being frozen, and that even Caleb's wedding home had been seized. I listened to it all and felt surprisingly calm. It was like a long, complicated surgery had finally been completed. The knife was put away. The bleeding had stopped, and I could finally sit down and catch my breath. The door opened softly. Lucian walked in, holding a glass of warm water. He didn't say anything, just set the glass down beside me. I looked down at the water and suddenly smiled. How do you always show up at exactly the right time? Because you never need saving. He leaned against the doorframe, his voice low. I just wait until you've finished fighting. Then bring you a glass of water. I looked up at him, my smile deepening. Mr. Cross, you say things like that, and people might get the wrong idea. Wrong idea about what? He looked at me. That you're a good person. Lucian laughed, the coldness in his eyes softening slightly. Then I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. He paused. I'm not. I know. I took a sip of the water. It was the perfect temperature. Good people don't buy up a family's debts when they're at their most vulnerable. And don't time it perfectly to make them collapse in public. Then why are you working with me? Because I'm not a good person either. We both laughed at that. Outside the window, the city lights stretched out like a vast, flowing sea of stars. The trending topics were still updating. My phone was still ringing, and the legal battles with the Thorns and Vosses were just beginning. Caleb, Layla, Margaret, Harold, Clara, Jasper, they all had years of lawsuits, debt collections, and public humiliation ahead of them. But I didn't need to watch every second of it. The worst punishment isn't killing someone quickly. It's making them watch as you take the place that was supposed to be theirs and build something even better than they ever could have imagined. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the media and crowd still gathered below. I suddenly thought back to that day on the wedding stage. The thought that had popped into my head. Perfect. Everyone was here. It was time for the Thorns to go bankrupt. And it turned out, I'd been exactly right. Footsteps came up behind me. Lucian walked to stand beside me, our shoulders almost touching. After a few seconds of silence, he suddenly said, "How do you feel now?" I looked out at the city and thought for a moment, like I'd just finished planning a funeral. He turned his head to look at me, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Congratulations then, they're the ones who died, not you." I blinked, then laughed. He was right, they were the ones who died. Caleb Thorne's fake charm and false dignity were dead. Layla Hart's stolen light and pretend genius were dead. The Voss family's ridiculous belief that I owed them everything was dead. And the part of me that thought being Riasona, Blee and compliant would ever get me what I deserved was dead too. But I was still standing. I was standing at the top of this building, in the light that truly belonged to me. And I finally let out a long, deep breath. Lucian, next time I get married. His eyebrows lifted slightly, and he turned to look at me fully. I smiled and finished the sentence. Remind me to check the books first. He looked at me and laughed a low, warm laugh that seemed to blow away the last of the weight that had been sitting on my shoulders for 3 years. My phone lit up again. The #1 trending topic was still the one that got away crashed the wedding she brought their entire family to ruin. I looked at that line and thought it was perfect. This time, I was finally the one standing in the spotlight.